Mr. Swalwell.
Mr. Chairman, a lot has changed since the whistleblower came forward. Two things in particular. First, most of what the whistleblower has alleged has been corroborated by the witnesses that we have heard from. Second, the president, who my colleagues so shamelessly continue to defend, continue to pressure, threaten, and intimidate the whistleblower. So I'd like unanimous consent to put into the record a September 26, 2019 article from Business Insider. Trump suggested the whistleblower who filed a complaint against him is guilty of treason, which is punishable by death.
Without objection.
How about September 26, 2019, Vanity Fair? Trump suggests executing the whistleblower's sources, like, quote, in the good old days. Third,
Without objection.
September 29th, whistleblower's lawyer raises fear for client safety.
Without objection.
From Axios. Mr. Chairman, the whistleblower has an absolute right to anonymity. The whistleblower's lawyer has said that he fears for his personal safety and will only answer questions now in writing. I wish my colleagues would join me in protecting the whistleblower's right to anonymity. But here, Ms. Yovanovitch, we are here to talk about you and what you witnessed. And you saw a lot as it related to Mr. Giuliani. And I want to read a quote to you from Mr. Giuliani, but first ask you, when you were in Ukraine, you understood that Rudy Giuliani was Donald Trump's personal lawyer. Is that right?
Yes, that's right.
Are you familiar with Rudy Giuliani's quote in the New York Times describing himself as the lawyer, saying, quote, he basically knows what I'm doing, comma, sure, as his lawyer. Were you familiar with that quote?
It sounds familiar.
And you have a lawyer with you today, Ms. Yovanovitch. And you understand that lawyers act on their client's behalf, is that right?
Yes.
That it would be improper for a lawyer to go outside any directive that a client gives, is that right?
That's my understanding.
Are you familiar with a New York Times story on May 9, 2019, where Rudy Giuliani says that he intends to visit Ukraine and says, we're not meddling in an election, we're meddling in an investigation. Are you familiar with that quote?
Yes.
That's 11 days before you were removed as ambassador, is that right?
Yes.
He is talking publicly about designs on coming to Ukraine, but what I think is interesting is that Mr. Giuliani says, we're, as in we are. He doesn't say I am not meddling in an election. He doesn't say I'm not meddling in an investigation. He says we. He's speaking for himself and his client. And I want to talk about that quote, we're not meddling in an election, we're meddling in an investigation. Is it proper for you or anyone who acts on behalf of the United States government to meddle in an investigation?
No, I don't believe so.
Why not?
Well, there are law enforcement channels, and things need to be handled properly and without any kind of political bias.
Now, this anti-corruption crusader, President Trump, who my colleagues have touted out as having such a great interest in anti-corruption, in both the calls that have been referenced today, the August 21 call and the July 25 call, isn't it true that President Trump never mentions the word corruption?
Yes, that's true.
And as far as the foreign aid that my colleagues keep saying, well, he can't be guilty, he didn't complete the cheat, the aid went to the Ukrainians, isn't it true that the only reason the aid, or the only time the aid went to the Ukrainians, was after the whistleblower complaint became public?
Yes, it was after the whistleblower complaint became public.
So you don't really get points when you get your hand caught in the cookie jar and someone says, hey, he's got his hand in the cookie jar, and then you take your hand out, which is essentially what my Republican colleagues and the president are trying to take credit for. Finally, I want to put up the disgusting tweet from the president today, where he attacks your character. But I think I know who you are, Ambassador. I think the country knows who you are. He smeared you when you were in Ukraine. He smeared you on that phone call with President Zelensky on July 25. He is smearing you right now as you are testifying. Ambassador Yovanovitch, are the president's smears going to stop you from fighting corruption?
Well, I will continue with my work.
And if your country asks you again to fight corruption, will you still do that despite the smears?
Yes.
Thank you. I yield back.